Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's session on starters and leavers in Stage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice, I'm your host and presenter for the session. I am also joined by some of my great colleagues in the background who are going to be hard at work on the Q&A, answering your questions throughout the session too. So today we have Duncan, David, Paddy and Gary. So thank you in advance to you guys for the help. Today's session is one of the webinars that we're doing as a kind of spin-off series to Payroll Year End as well. So we do have our main Payroll Year End webinars, that's part 1 and 2, if you haven't seen them yet. And then in these other sessions, we talk about some more common topics over Payroll Year End. It's not just starters and leavers either, so stay tuned until the end, and I will let you know what else we've got coming up. And then in terms of what we're covering today, I've broken down the webinar into kind of 3 main sections. So first one is going to be all about new starters, including all of the information that you'll need to set up the employees and the options that you've got to do so in the programme. I've also picked out some common year-end questions that we get, so I'll be answering those too. We'll then move on to processing leavers. So this does include processing their final payments and then the options to process leavers, and again, how to do this in the programme. And then same as the starters, I've included some common year-end questions around leavers and some top tips as well. And then we'll move on to submitting to HMRC. So how are you going to submit that new starter and leaver information to HMRC in the full payment submission? And then as always, we will finish with some further support. So what else we've got available to you, including webinars that are coming up, and obviously some time as well at the end to continue answering your questions too. So that is what we've got planned. And just starting with that new starter section then, I do want to begin with the information that you're going to need in order to add a new starter. So for this, there are 3 main categories. And the first one is personal details. So this is the information you'll need in terms of personal details. It's going to be their full name, firstly. So this is their full name as it shows on ID or any official documents. It can't be nicknames or shorter versions. You'll also need the employee's address, at least 2 lines and a postcode, their date of birth, their gender, and their national insurance number if that's available. You'll also need payment details. This is obviously so you know how to pay them. This includes which pay elements you'll need to assign them, their rates of pay. So is that a fixed salary per payment period, or will they get paid hourly? And you'll also need to know how many hours they work. So what are their contracted hours? Because this information will be sent across to HMRC in the full payment submission. And then third thing to consider here is the starter form from your employee. Most commonly, this will be a P45 that they've got from their previous employer. But if they don't have one of these, they will need a starter checklist. And the starter checklist is what's replaced the old P46 form. Some less common examples there too, you've got the P46 pen or P46 expat forms. So these are used for payrolls that are paying out a pension to an employee or for employees seconded to work in the UK. In today's example though, we will stick to those more common starter forms there, so the P45 and the starter checklist. But that's the information that you'll need. Let's also take a closer look at those forms now. So I've got a screenshot of both of them here. On the left is the P45. There are 3 parts to this. So you'll need part 2 to actually set up the employee's record in payroll. That's what's going to have all of that information on for you. You'll also need to take part 3 from the employee. And then part 1, this is just the employee's copy. So if they do give you this, you can just give that back to them. Then on the right-hand side there, we've got the starter checklist. So this is for if the employee doesn't have a P45. It is available to download from the gov.uk website too, and I've just linked that there on the handout. We'd always recommend having spare copies of this or kind of easy access to this as well. It is just a really great form for capturing information about the employee. Obviously, if they don't have a P45, they'll use this. But it does also include things which aren't on the P45, such as student loan information. So it might be a good idea for them to fill it out anyway. Once you've got this information that you need from the employee, at that point you will be ready to set up the employee's record. And this is what I'll be showing you in the demonstration today. So in Stage 50 Payroll, there are 2 main ways to set up an employee record. You've got 2 options for this. That's either going to be the employee wizard or the quick employee option. So the employee wizard is going to walk you through each step of setting up the record. In my opinion, this is a little bit of an easier way to see the information that you're entering, as it's broken down step by step or page by page, I suppose, in here. And this option does also allow a little bit more detail to be entered, but it could take you a bit longer to input that information, so just bear that in mind. Then second option, this is the quick employee option, and this opens up the page that you can see there on the screenshot. So everything is just there on one page, and you'll kind of work through the different sections there to input the information. And as the name suggests, it is the quicker option, so it just depends on which way that you prefer. Now with both of these options, the required or mandatory information that you will need to enter is marked with an asterisk symbol. So that is the minimum information that you'll need in order to set up the employee's record. So let me show you these options now in the programme. So this is my payroll here. I'm just logged in at the moment. And if I just go to the employee tasks, both of these options can be found in here. So I've first of all got the employee wizard, and I've got the quick employee option too. So if I just click on employee wizard there, this will allow you to record the details of the new starter using that starter forms, the P45 or starter checklist. And you'll basically just click next, enter the information and click next and kind of work through this wizard page by page until you see the finish button there. And then clicking finish is going to create that employee record. So that is one option you've got to enter the information. The other option as well, the quick employee option, as you'll see, this just opens up this one page. So everything is on this one page for you to enter. It does look like quite a lot on here, but it is kind of broken down into different sections. And as I say, anything mandatory is going to be marked with a little asterisk symbol here. Anything else that you want to enter, you can always add that into the employee's record at a later date. Another option that you've got, and this is really helpful if you're hiring someone who's working in the same department or has similar settings to another employee that you've already got, is to copy the settings from an existing employee to that new employee's record. It's also a really good option if you're rehiring someone who's previously left your company, and it'll just save you time having to input loads of information that you already have before. So just to show you what I mean, I'm just going to highlight an employee that I'd like to base the new employee's record off, employee number 5 here, and then I'll click on Employee Wizard. And you'll see I now have more options to choose from, so I can record the details using that starter form as I had before. I could also create an employee record based off an existing employee, so in my case, the employee that I've highlighted. I could also re-employ an employee. So this is if, for example, employee number 5 was a leaver and they'd rejoined my employment at a later date. What it would do is recreate their record for this new employment and copy over the personal details too. So it would save you time having to enter those again. And let me just show you the same thing with the quick employee option. So it does give you the kind of prompts here. So do you want to base your new employee on an existing record and copy over some information? If they're a leaver, it will also ask if you want to re-employ them. I'm going to click yes. I just want to show you what information it brings in. So if I click yes, that's just going to bring up the window here. And I can see straight away it's got the same pay elements that I had assigned to employee number 5. They've been assigned to the same department, so they're in the admin department here. And they're also in the same payment frequency, so they're all going to be monthly. So it's brought over some information there. And from here, to actually add the employee, it would just be a case of adding in the basic details. So I'll add in their name here, employee 11. I'm going to add in their address here. That's 2 lines and a postcode at least, remember. Not very creative with this, but I'll enter that there. And you'll just continue to input any information there, including an email address. So let me just pop that in. So if you use the online services, so the online payslips for your employees in payroll, you can enter the email address in here and enable those online services at this point. And this means that this person will be able to get their profile created the next time that the payslips are uploaded. And this email address that you've used in here, this will be the employee's login to the online services. Now, if you're not sure what the online payslips are or you've never used them before, we are actually running a few webinars this month on payslips and P60s. It is a free option to set up for payroll, and it's a quick way and a secure way to give your employees their payslips. So if it's free, may as well make the most of it, and you can attend that webinar, just find out a bit more information of how to set it up and use it. But as I mentioned, the information marked with an asterisk is mandatory, so we'll just continue and enter a date of birth. Enter that there, as well as whether I've conducted a right to work check. So for this, I'm going to select yes. You do have the option of adding further details of this. So if, for example, it was a UK passport, I could select that there and pop in a bit of information, and this information will be recorded in the employee's record. I am just going to leave that for now. I'll also enter the employee's start date. So they started with us on the 14th of March. And we can see it's already set their payment frequency to monthly too. You can add the bank details at this point, but this is just something I'm going to do in the future in the employee's records. I'll leave that blank for now. And that's kind of the left-hand side complete there. So moving on to the top right, this is where we enter that all-important starter form information. It's currently selected as P45 in this drop-down. And you will get most of this information from the P45. So as we saw in the slides, you do get the date that they've left the previous employment. You get their total pay to date and total tax to date, and that's for the current tax year. And you also get their tax code at leaving date too. Now, one of the things that the P45 won't include is the starting declaration, and as you can see, that is a mandatory field there. So this is why it's a really good idea to get them to also fill in that starter checklist, and that way they'll be able to answer some questions about their previous employment, previous jobs, and they will then be able to pick a statement. So that's going to be either statement A, statement B, or statement C. Now this particular employee, they don't have a P45, so instead I'm going to select P46. They filled in that starter checklist instead. And I'm also going to choose their starting declaration. So the one that applies to them is statement B. And it does automatically assign the relevant tax code to them as well. We can see that week 1, month 1 box is ticked too. From here, I'm going to enter the employee's national insurance number. So let me just pop that in. If you don't know what the employee's national insurance number is, you can just tick not known here. Just make sure that you don't make it up. And then also the employee's national insurance category. So this is just standard rate contributions for this employee. They didn't indicate that they were going to continue student loan or postgraduate loan deductions on that starter checklist, so I will just leave those as no. And then under here, of course, it did copy in that department there, so they're already in the admin department. But something else I'd like to point out here is the pensions drop down. So there's no pension scheme selected at the moment. And I'm just going to leave it as that because I use the pensions module. So if you also use the pensions module in payroll, you must let the module assign the pension scheme. So if you're using like the pension assessment, the send pension data option in payroll, you're going to let the pension assessment assess the employee and assign a scheme, just to ensure that the correct information is generated for your pension provider. If you don't use the pensions module though, and you kind of do things manually in payroll, what you just need to do is select that pension scheme from the drop-down. From here, you can add some more information. It's not mandatory at this point though, so you could add a job title, you could add their gross salary, which I'm actually going to do, so I'll pop that in, and that's going to be £30,000 per year. Now, because payroll knows that this employee is monthly as well, what payroll's going to do is automatically convert this into a monthly salary and enter payments. We already have a couple of pay elements assigned in here too, so they've been copied from that existing record that we highlighted. But for any others that you'd like to add, you'll just use the drop down there and then choose from the ones that you've set up. Same with deductions as well, so you can just assign them from there. We have actually entered enough information at this point, so we can see the save and clear or save and retain buttons aren't grayed out. So what I'm going to do is just save and clear. And what this is going to do is clear down the form ready for me to enter any other employee information and repeat these steps if I was adding multiple employees. Just a reminder to add the bank account details in the record too. And we can see that's been cleared down. So I'm just going to close this. And I can see that new employee record's been created there for employee number 11. So for anything further that I need to add, or if I'd like to view the record, I'll just be able to open up the employee, and that just brings up the record as normal. I am actually going to go ahead and enter their contracted hours too. So if I just go to employment, and salary. I can see it's brought through that £30,000 per year that I entered in that quick employee option. And I just want to specify as well, just a bit more information for the record, that they're going to be working 40 hours per week. And then save. So this employee's record is sorted, it's all set up. Of course, I'll just add the bank details at a later point. And this is now ready to use the next time that I process payroll. Now, something to note as well, I did mention that payroll works out their monthly salary automatically based on the information that I've entered. But just to bear in mind, for the first period that this employee's worked, they might not have worked the full month. So in my case, they started on the 14th of March. So they haven't worked the entire month. I'm actually going to need to do an adjustment to their pay for the days that they've worked, and I'll show you that shortly. But for now, we'll pop back to the slides. And that was actually adding my new starter with a starter form using that quick employee option. Do remember though, you do have the option of the employee wizard. So this allows you to enter the same information, but it's on a step-by-step basis instead. So kind of broken up a little bit more. And that is my new starter ready to be processed. But as I say, I'll come back to that demo and show you that a bit in a little while there. I am also going to be submitting the new starter details to HMRC on the full payment submission. And before we go on to that, I do want to touch on some common questions that we get around new starters, especially around year end. So I've picked out some that we get quite often, and I just want to go through them and kind of explain what the answers are to those. So starting off with the first common question, and this is, what if the leave date that what if the date they left the previous employment on a P45 was in the previous tax year? So if an employee was joining me this May, for example, so that's in the new tax year, but they left their previous employment in March, obviously the new tax year begins in April, so they left their previous employment last tax year. If that is the case, the key thing here is that no previous pay or tax needs to be entered, as they're not relevant for the current tax year. So on the P45, the total pay to date and total tax to date, that is for the current tax year. So if it's a different tax year to what they're joining you in, it's not going to be relevant information. And actually, payroll makes sure that the previous pay and tax boxes are greyed out anyway, if the date left previous employment is in a previous tax year. If the date is from a previous tax year, just key thing here, no previous pay or tax needs to be entered. So for more information on exactly what to do, I have linked to more information on the slide here, so just make sure to download the handout and you can read a little bit more about that scenario. But that's one that we get asked quite a lot. Another one that we get as well, this is, what if an employee does not have a P45 or a starter checklist? So they don't have kind of either of those options. Sometimes you won't be able to get this information, that might just not be possible. So if that is the case, you can still enter the employee's record, but when you're setting them up, whether that's the employee wizard or the quick employee option, you'll be able to choose P46, so that is the starter checklist, but you will then be able to select the starting declaration as none. So you did have the options for statement A, B or C, you did also have an option at the bottom there for none. What this will do is it'll put them on a 0T tax code for the time being. Hopefully that will prompt the employee to get one of those forms to you. But if not, you will receive a tax code notice from HMRC at some point, and that will give you the new tax code for the employee. So if you've got neither of those starter forms, choose P46 and then the starting declaration as none. Next question that I've picked out for you is, what if I receive a P45 or starter checklist after the employee's first FPS? And the answer to this, it depends on whether you've received a new tax code from HMRC. If you have received a new tax code, forget about that P45 or starter checklist and just go with that new tax code that you've been given. But if you haven't and you're still waiting on that, but you've received the starter form, you are actually able to input those details after the fact. So I just want to bring payroll back up and show you where you would do this. So if we go into my new employee, for example, you do have an option for starter form just at the top here. So if you haven't received a new tax code notice from HMRC yet and you still need to input this information, you'll just select the relevant form. So let's just say P45, for example. Click Next, and this starter form wizard will just walk you through inputting that information depending on the form that you've got, and then click Finish, and that'll allow you to enter the information that you need. But remember, if you do receive a tax code from HMRC, just use what you've been given from them. Question number 4 that I've picked out for you. So this is, how can I re-employ a leaver? I did really briefly touch on this when we were talking about entering the new starter there. But when you are adding them, remember you've got the different options for when you're creating the record. So if you highlight the employee who's returning, so you highlight the leaver record, you will have the option to re-employ them in the employee wizard or the quick employee option. And that'll also copy over any of the personal details and things like that, and just save you time having to re-enter those again. And then last one that I've got for you, question number 5 for new starters. So this one is, I have an employee who started with me in March, but they aren't getting paid until the end of April. Will they get a P60 in the 24-25 payroll year-end process? And the answer to this is no, they won't. So P60s are for employees who are still employed with you as of the 5th of April, but they must have also received pay in the tax year. So yes, this employee technically started with you and are technically employed as of the 5th of April, but because they've not received their first pay yet, they won't get a P60. So the programme won't produce one of those for you. So just bear that in mind. But they're some of the most common questions that we get around new starters, particularly around payroll year-end. So I did just want to go through those with you. And moving on to the next section of the webinar now. So we're kind of going to the opposite side of things now, and we're going to talk about leavers and processing these. So when someone leaves your employment, there are a few things to do in payroll just to make sure that you've marked them as a leaver and you've reported this to HMRC correctly too. The first thing you need to consider is that you've processed their final pay run. A couple of things for you to consider at this point as well. So have you included all of the outstanding payments and deductions? So with them leaving too, they might not have worked the full period. So you might also need to consider whether you need to manually adjust the employee's pay, like adjusting their hours or their salary. Also whether they've accrued like overtime or holiday allowance as well that hasn't been taken. Are they receiving a statutory payment? This is probably more so for the longer term payments like maternity or adoption pay. In most cases, when the employee leaves, if they are receiving this pay, they will be entitled to be paid their full remaining entitlement too. So if this is the case, you can pay it in a lump sum. I'll show you kind of how the payroll will be able to work that out, or continue paying them until that payment is over. And something else is whether you'll be paying the employee early. So if they're leaving near the beginning of the pay period, for example, and you want to report that pay date, you can do this. You could kind of process a little mini pay run just for the employee who's leaving with that earlier pay date. So your process date set to that. And you will need to submit this pay date to HMRC on the FPS too. So just bear that in mind. If you came to our payroll year-end webinars, so parts 1 and 2, you will recall us also mentioning directors, particularly pro rata directors. They do have a recalculation at the end of the tax year, but also if they're leaving, they will have a recalculation in the last pay period before they leave, just to make sure that their national insurance has been calculated correctly, and of course that they've paid that correct amount of national insurance. And then last thing to consider, not a very nice one, but has the employee died? If they have, the last payment isn't going to be subject to any national insurance, so something else to think about there. And you can find out more information about all of these considerations using that link there on the slide. But when you're entering that final payment for the leaver and you're in Enter Payments, you will also see this tick box that I've highlighted there. And this is just saying to select this checkbox if your employee is leaving and this is their final payment. This is a really important tick box. It does do quite a few things. Really important to check because first of all, it does recalculate the director's national insurance. So for any pro rata directors, as directors are calculated on an annual basis, the national insurance does need to be recalculated just to make sure that it's correct up to this final payment. It also pays cash rounding amounts and the outstanding holiday fund if you use holidays in Sage 50 payroll. Maybe any tax refunds that have been withheld due to a trade dispute. And then also calculates outstanding items. So this could be statutory payments, for example, if they're on maternity or adoption pay. So it basically is going to make sure that everything is sorted and calculated, ready for this employee leaving. Now, if none of these bullet points apply to your employee, you will likely see no difference to their pay when you tick the box, but it is definitely best practice to tick it just in case there is anything that needs to be recalculated or paid. And again, bear in mind, you might actually have to manually adjust their salary or hours according to when they're leaving. So we'll take a look at this in a demonstration now. We'll go back to payroll. And I've got my new starter here still highlighted, so I'm just going to deselect them. I've not actually processed payroll just yet, so we're going to go ahead and process that. I'm going to process and update the final payment for my leaver and then mark them as a leaver. And this person who is leaving me is employee number 1. They're actually a director too. I'm just going to highlight everyone and go back to my payroll tasks. First thing I'm going to do is just make sure that my process date is set to my next pay date, which is the 31st of March. Perfect. Great, so I am going to process everyone in this demo, but I'm just going to focus on the leaver and then my new starter as well, just so there are a few adjustments that I need to make to their pay. It's just deselecting a couple of leavers and things that I've got too. So this first employee, as I said, this is the person leaving me, the director. So they are receiving their final pay this period. They actually need the pay adjusting as well to the days that they've worked. So they left me on the 21st of March. They didn't work the full month. And I just want to lower their pay, obviously, according to the days that they've worked. A couple of ways that you can do this, but today I'm going to use a manual adjustment. And what I'm going to do is the total, the days that they've worked in the period, which for this employee is 15 before they left, divided by the total working days in the pay period for them. So they work Monday to Friday. So in this case, that's a total of 21 working days for them. So I'm going to use this little calculator icon and enter payments. And I'm just going to do that calculation. So 15 days worked in the pay period, divided by the total working days in the pay period for this employee. Click equals. And if you just keep an eye on this amount on the right-hand side, as I click tab on my keyboard, I can see that's reduced down. So that is now 15 days worth of pay for this employee. Now, since they're a director and they're leaving, I also need to check this box in the bottom right corner just to inform payroll that they're leaving and that this is their final payment. So back on the slides, I did show you that this tick box does quite a few things, including recalculating the director's national insurance and anything else that might be outstanding for the employee. So I'll go ahead and tick that. A message does come up just advising of my next steps for the employee, so updating the records, processing them as a leaver, and then submitting the full payment submission. So I'll click OK. And it also comes up with a message just informing me that the employee is director, so the national insurance is going to be recalculated, and you might see the national insurance figure change. Now in this case, there hasn't really been a change to the national insurance, but again, this will look different from director to director. And what that tick box has done is recalculated the contributions based on the annual legislation thresholds for the directors instead. But once you're happy with their pay, you can go ahead and click Save Next. And I'm just going to pretend that I've checked everyone else's and move across to my new starter, which is employee number 11. Perfect. So I can see payroll has converted that into a monthly salary for them. Remember that I entered the gross annual salary as £30,000. But again, I do need to make an adjustment to this employee. So they started on the 14th of March, so they haven't worked the full period. Same type of adjustment I'm going to do, a manual adjustment using this calculator icon. And I'm going to say that they've worked 12 days out of the month, divided by a total of 21. So again, this employee works Monday to Friday. Click equals, and keep an eye on this amount. As I click tab on my keyboard, that's reduced there and is now 12 working days of pay for the employee. Now from next period, it will be a full salary again, so I could just reset this hours and number value back to 1, as they will have worked the full period. There we go, but I've got no other changes to make, so that is enter payments done. After this, it would just be a case of your normal next steps, so any other pre-update tasks that you do, whether that's the pension assessment, your pre-update reports, of course the pay slips for the employee, so whether that's printing or emailing, or uploading the online pay slips. But for today, I'm just going to skip ahead to update the records for my employees. Always take a backup at this point as well. It's a really good idea to have a pre-update backup if you ever need to restore that data. I'm just going to skip ahead and click Next Next and finish. Great, and we can see my last updated date's now changed to the 31st of March. And that is the records updated. So I have processed and updated my leavers last payment. And before we move on to submitting the HMRC, the next thing I actually need to do for my leaver is run the leaver wizard. So I actually need to make them a leaver. Few places that you can do this from. Before I do, just a really important note, please make sure you've only got the employee or employees who are leaving you highlighted, or you could accidentally mark more than who you need to as leavers. You can find the leaver wizard in quite a few places. So one place in the employee tasks, you see you've got the option for leaver there. If you go to wizards, you've also got the leaver wizard there too. I'm actually just going to do it from the employee's record today. So I'll open that up, go to employment, and I've got leaver there at the bottom. Now all of those different options will open up the same leaver wizard. Just depends on where you prefer to do that from. But this first page is a little bit of an overview of what the leaver wizard will do, along with a note at the bottom. So before continuing with the wizard, you do need to make sure that you've completed the final pay run for this employee, which I have. So I'll click next. And this is the page where you're going to make them a leaver. So employee's name, just double check that at the top. Leaving date as well, this has defaulted to my process date, but I'm just going to change that to the date they've actually left, which is the 21st of March. And you will also have a tick box here on the right hand side. So if the employee has passed and that's why you're marking them as a leaver, you can tick that box and obviously HMRC will be informed of that. And then underneath this, this is where you'll be able to select your stationery. You do have options to preview or print these as well. So we've got lots of different layouts and things for the P45. I would actually recommend the P45 plain paper for e-submissions. That's probably the most popular layout, and it can be printed on a plain paper as well. So let me just click preview and show you what this looks like. It is the same layout as the one that I showed you a little bit earlier on the slides. As always, you've got the options to print if you want to print just straight from here, or export, so if you want to save that as a PDF to your computer, for example. And then, of course, you've got part 1, part 2, and part 3 of the P45 there for the employee. Very important as well that you only produce and issue one P45 to your employee, even if there have been changes to the final pay after the fact. If you've already given them a P45, do not give them another one, and that's per HMRC's advice. But now that I've entered that leave date, I've produced the stationery, I'm just going to click finish to mark the employee as a leaver. Perfect. And if I just check, I can see their status is now changed to leaver on the employee list. And we can also see a leave date now in the employee record. Something to note here, if you do find that you've done this by mistake and the employee isn't actually leaving you, you can just remove the leave date here, save the record and continue processing them as normal since you haven't notified HMRC in the FPS yet. But I'm happy with this, so I'm just going to click Save and Close. And after this, it would be a case of submitting to HMRC. So just to recap there, we did process and update the final payment for the employee leaving, including ticking that checkbox there. We then used the leaver wizard to mark them as a leaver and produce the P45 too. Now, in terms of notifying HMRC of my new starter and leaver, this is done automatically when you send the FPS for the employees. So the FPS will include all of the normal information on payments, deductions, liabilities for the period, etc. But when you have a new starter, it will also include a bit more information. So it'll include the employee's start date, their address, their starter declaration, and student loan indicator as well. And when you get to that important information window on the FPS, just looking on that screenshot on the right, you will see it does have the start date in the starter column there. So that's kind of flagging them as a new starter to HMRC. For leavers, similar things. So all the information that HMRC needs, including their leave date, which you can see on that screenshot. You just need to send the FPS, and that's how HMRC are informed of this. Something else to consider though for leavers is notifying your pension provider that they've left. So we would encourage you to just contact your pension provider just in case there is anything that you'll need to do on that side of things. But again, let's go back to the demo. I do want to get this FPS submitted. So I'm going to highlight everybody. I'm going to go back to my payroll tasks. And I'm just going to go ahead and click full payment submission. Just want to show you what it's going to send to HMRC. So this is just a normal FPS. We'll double check those company details and click submit. And here we can see employee number 1 is marked as a leaver with that leave date there. And if I scroll down, I can see my new starter's date there too. So HMRC are being informed of this. I'm just going to go ahead and click submit. So once this has been sent to HMRC, it will be a case of then issuing the P45 to the employee who's left. So whether you want to email that or print that out, totally up to you. And then, of course, as I mentioned, they're notifying the pension provider of the leaver as well. But that is submitting the HMRC. It is just a case of submitting that full payment submission, normal payment information and liabilities and things for the period, as well as any starter or leaver information. Now, to finish the webinar off, I do have some common questions, this time around leavers. So I know we already covered starters, but we do have some common questions that we get asked around leavers as well. Quite a few of these, to be honest, so I've tried to just pick the most common ones. I'll try and keep them brief, but I have linked to more information for each of these questions on the slides. There's loads of further information here too. So the first common question that we normally get asked around leavers is, can I hide leavers from my employee list? And yes, you can. So if you click the criteria option above your employee list, which is just this little icon there looking like a funnel, in this option, you've got different options to filter your employee list. So just at the top, you've got some filters. At the bottom, you do also have some tick boxes to exclude certain employees based on their status. So if you do have loads of leavers, for example, and they're kind of messing up the employee list, you could just tick to exclude these employees. When you click OK, you can see they disappear from the list there. So that might just be a good way for you to kind of tidy that up. But you absolutely can do that. Question number 2, this one is, I forgot to mark an employee as a leaver and I've submitted the FPS. So what would you do in that scenario? Really easy fix for this one actually. So all you would need to do is actually mark them as a leaver at that point. So run the leaver wizard, enter the leave date, and then produce the P45. And then you would submit an FPS adjustment for them, for the employee, just to inform HMRC that they've in fact left your employment and that they're no longer employed. So just run the leaver wizard and then an FPS adjustment. And then question number 3, this is, I've processed a leaver, but I forgot to update the final payment. So if you have forgotten to process the final payment with that tick box that I mentioned earlier, so you've missed them out from the pay run, you'll first of all need to just destroy the P45 that you've produced, remove the leave date from the employee's record, just to make payroll aware that they aren't a leaver. You'll process their final payment with that tick box and update the records, and then run the leaver wizard again. And then what will happen is the next FPS will send over that leaver information and that final payment information for HMRC as well. So just make sure you essentially take a step back, process the payment, and then re-update them and mark them as a leaver again. Question number 4, this is, I've processed a leaver by mistake and have submitted the FPS. This can be easily done, especially if you've not realised that you've had someone else highlighted as you've been processing a leaver. But since you've sent the FPS, HMRC are aware of this leaver. So what you'll need to do is delete the leave date from the employee's record and then just simply continue to use the existing record for the employee. So dead easy fix for this one. And once you've processed the next payment, and you've sent that next FPS, HMRC will in fact be informed that they're still employed and that it was a mistake that you'd marked them as a leaver. So if you've processed them as a leaver by mistake, just take out that leave date there and continue using the record as normal. A couple more that I've picked out for you as well. So this one is a really common one. Question number 5. What if my employee is leaving in March, but they aren't receiving their final pay until April? So especially around payroll year end, and if you pay your employees in arrears, we get asked this loads. So if they are leaving before the tax year ends, but they're actually getting their final pay in the next tax year. With this, the P45 is required to show the date that they've left their employment with the year-to dates for that tax year too. So in this case, 24-25. So what you'll actually need to do is process the employee's final payment in 25-26, so the new tax year, in April for this scenario. And then you'll have to set your process date back to the 24-25 tax year to process the employee as a leaver and print the P45. What that's going to do is just ensure that the P45 has the correct dates on it. So everything is sorted with that. There are articles on the Help Centre going through scenarios like this step by step. So if this does apply to you, please download the handout and click on read more, and you will be able to see this kind of scenario broken down step by step if you do come across this yourself. And then last question that I've picked out for you today. This question is, can I give an employee extra pay after I've made them a leaver? And you can. So a couple of different ways that you can do this. It depends really if you'd like to roll them back and correct their last payment to add that extra pay in there, or if you want to process an extra payment for them in a later period. Each of these are really common scenarios. We do have, again, steps to both of these scenarios on an article that I've just linked there. So be sure to download the handout just to be able to access these. But yeah, a couple of ways you can do it. You can either roll back and process the extra pay there, or process the extra payment in a later period. But yeah, you absolutely can give extra pay to a leaver. So I just wanted to cover those since they have been asked quite a lot in the webinars so far as well. But that is all of the common questions that I've got for you in terms of leavers. And that does bring us to the end of the main webinar content today. Still a few minutes left to download the handout or download any of the questions that we've gone through in the Q&A if you do want to keep any of those. And before we do actually finish, one last thing to touch on, which is the further support that we've got available to you all, starting with the upcoming webinars this month. So as I said at the beginning, we do have our normal payroll year-end webinars. We've got parts 1 and 2. Part 2 is running all the way through to the 15th of April. So if you've not attended that one just yet, definitely get yourself signed up for that. In that one, we'll take you through the whole payroll year-end process, start to finish, all of the steps that you'll need to do there. And we also tell you how to get ready for the new tax year, so you're ready to go ahead and process payroll there. Any new legislation or programme changes as well, we do also talk about. And then we also have some more common topics over payroll year-end that we've got. So, of course, corrections at year-end, starters and leavers, which you've attended today, directors' national insurance, and as I mentioned before, online pay slips and P60s too. So if you want to know any more about those, be sure to click register now on the handout or go to sage.co.uk/webinars. For any of you who do HR too, we have our next HR advice webinar. This is on redundancy, 2P and restructure, navigating business cost challenges. That is on the 29th of April, and we do have some expert special guests from Advisor Plus who are going to be going through this webinar and talking through some really great advice there. So definitely get yourself signed up for that. Something else is our Sage Help Centre. So this is sage.co.uk/help. It's also available from the homepage of various places in payroll. But all of the help articles that I've linked on these slides are from here. Really fantastic resource to get access to any articles or further information that you need. Just search for what you need and you will have some search results come up to different articles. Some of these will include demonstration videos and things as well. We've got a webinar section there, so if you do want to view any previous webinar recordings and kind of watch those, you absolutely can. And then if you do need to get in contact with us, if you need technical support or something, for example, we do have the contact options there too. And then last thing to touch on is Sage University. So here you can set up a free account on sageu.com and you can access different e-learning or bite-sized learning courses. Completing these as well, you do also have the opportunity to earn product certification. So if you do want to know a little bit more about Sage 50 Payroll or any other Sage products that you've got with us, you absolutely can, and that's just sageu.com. But that has brought us to the end of our Starters and Leavers webinar. So we are going to hang around just for a few minutes to try and get the last answers out to your questions. If you do have any last minute questions, get those in the Q&A now and we will try and answer all of them or as many as we can before we end the session. Do remember a couple of minutes left if you do want to keep any of those questions or answers too. Last thing from me, there is going to be a short survey as you exit the webinar, so if you do have just a minute to fill that out or you've got any comments to leave us, I would really, really appreciate that. The feedback does go a long way, so thank you in advance for anything that you've got to say. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go on mute for a few minutes just to kind of help with those last questions. Just check on that Q&A panel, and I'll be back in a few moments to kind of say goodbye and end the webinar. So I'll see you in a few moments. Hello everyone, that's just me back again. Thank you so much for all of those questions and for your time today as well. It looks like most of them, if not all of them, have been answered, so a very big thank you to the team behind the scenes. But yeah, that is it from us today, so hopefully you've enjoyed it and we would love to see you on some more webinars in the future. So from myself and the webinar team, it is goodbye for now.